welcome. Welcome to the session, and thank you so much for taking the time. I would like to give it over to you with a question. What are the challenges women face in securing a seat at the table? As we look to the large spectrum of women in their all diversity, what are the specific challenges that women of color or women immigrants might face also? What is your take? Tell us about what we need to know mainly today about securing a seat at the table.
Thank you, Diana. I am honored to be here with all of you this morning. Thank you to you and Women, and Karina's information that she gave, which is so timely because it really sets the tone to the question that Diana asked, because all forms of inequality is interconnected. And I think once we understand that as women, as humans, then we'll see each other's issues as our own, right? And so, for example, in my experience, I spent 15 years in corporate and nonprofit roles, and I was often always the only. Maybe you've experienced that in your industry, being the only woman of color, being the only of something. And when you are the only of something or one of few, it can feel very isolating. It can feel very lonely. And oftentimes, I think as women in general, when we do feel like we are in the minority and not the dominant majority, we sometimes lose our voice, right? And for me, I was always the only one, and at certain points in time, I would have managers or colleagues say inappropriate things to me about my race. For example, one of the challenges that I faced as a woman of color, as a Black woman particularly, was being a woman in the workplace. And oftentimes when my colleagues would say women in the workplace, they weren't necessarily including me. And that's why intersectionality is so important, because most of the time when they were talking about advancing women, or they were talking about the gender pay gap, they were talking about one particular group of women, not all women, right? And we can't just focus on the success of some women in the workplace. We need to focus on the success of all women. And that's why intersectionality is so important. For example, I had one manager one day when I had burnt orange fingernail polish on, and he said to me, "You people love your bright colors." And he went on to joke for 15 minutes about how Black people like bright colors. That was an experience early in my career that still hurts when I think about it today. Because in that moment, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. And there were no other Black people around. There were other, those in the United States who would identify as being Caucasian or white, and no one said anything. And we all know when those moments happen, those awkward silence, right? And it's so important that we show up for ourselves when we're able, but also show up for each other. And that's why I'm so excited about having this conversation today, is because so many of us have been in a situation where we felt alone, where we've settled into microaggressions, where we've settled into bias, we've settled into silencing our voices because the environments that we're in would communicate that our voices are not important. And the first step that I want to talk to you about in this paradigm to securing your seat at the table is self-advocacy. Because for so long, I didn't feel like I had a voice. And many people will say, "Minda, where did you find your voice? How did you find your voice after all that time?" And I said, you know what? We all have a voice. We just have to decide how we want to use it. And the more that I started to dig into my career, I realized that the things that I was feeling uncomfortable about, the inequalities that I was experiencing, if I didn't advocate for myself, that means that I'm also not advocating for the next group of women that come behind me, right? They're going to inherit some of the same issues, the same inequalities, if I don't lean into my courage. And so using your voice is definitely, it can be scary, right? Especially for me, I'm an extreme introvert, and you may not know that upon meeting me, but I very much am. And so part of your self-advocacy is leaning into your courage and pushing aside your caution, because nobody benefits when we're cautious. Nobody, including ourselves. And so when I was in the workplace experiencing different inequalities, I didn't think I had the agency to speak up for myself, but I found that I had to, right? There's a way that you can do it, diplomatically. And part of that was understanding a quote that I always lean on by the late Audre Lorde. She says, beware of feeling like you're not good enough to deserve it. And as women, we deserve it. We've worked too hard to lean out now. And so the thing that I would encourage you to do is figure out how you want to use your voice, right? Because when we speak up for ourselves, we're speaking up for the next person too. And I realized that if I don't talk about some of these inequalities, if I don't let my managers know that, hey, no, that's inappropriate conversation here along the way. It was small acts of courage, right? It didn't happen overnight, but I started to think about, I don't want the next woman of color. I don't want the next woman to have to inherit this type of environment. So what am I going to do to advocate for myself, but also for the next and current generation? So that first step of securing our seat, whatever table you might want to be at, or even creating your own, is that self-advocacy, your self-worth, knowing that your voice matters, right? And the other part of that too is understanding that every table or every room, every virtual room that I walk into, I belong in, but not every room deserves to have me in it. And I think as women, we have to understand our worth, right? Sometimes we're trying to change a toxic environment that's never going to create inequality. So we have to give ourselves permission to find those places, plant ourselves at tables where we can grow. And so the next thing that I want to talk to you about is building your squad. As you're securing your seat at the table, we need a board of directors, we need teammates, we need colleagues, we need other women who are there fighting the good fight with us. And so one of the things that I learned in my career, when I first entered corporate America, the advice that I was given, and maybe some of you were given the same advice, is just work really hard, keep your head down, don't rock the boat, don't create any waves, right? And so as I'm working really hard with my head down, I'm also not building the key and strategic relationships that I need to help move my career forward, right? And so I was seeing some of my colleagues and other women moving ahead who may not have been working as hard as I was, but they were making key relationships, right? So having good work ethic is great, but also building the right relationships, building strategic relationships with other people was just as important. And even though many of us are working in virtual environments, we can still create network. We can still tap into building relationships, asking a colleague or asking someone in senior staff for a 15-minute coffee, virtual coffee, or a lunch, right? Those things are still happening. Deals are still being made. Promotions are still being had. And we need to be in those rooms. We need people that are speaking our names in the virtual or physical rooms that we're not in. And so in my career, I learned that success is not a solo sport. I needed to build my team. I needed to build a group of people for the rooms that I wasn't in, the tables that I wasn't at, who was going to advocate on my behalf. And if you are in those rooms today, who are you advocating for, right? And so sometimes you'll hear, oh, they're self-made. No one is self-made. There was someone who invested in their success. And so investing in your personal success is important just the same. Investing in all of you who are here today, you're doing that. So I would be preaching to the choir otherwise, but understanding that we need each other. And I think this is where intersectionality is truly, truly important, because sometimes we don't think about the experiences of other women in the workplace, right? And so if you have a group, for example, follow me in this analogy, is if we were all driving to the same place, let's say that the workplace is a car. We're all driving to the same place. Now, sometimes there's certain women who will always only get to sit in the front seat. They'll always be driving. They never know what it's felt like to sit in the back seat. Again, we're talking about the workplace, but I'm using the car as an analogy. There will be people that only ever have the opportunity to drive the car. and there'll be people who only ever have the opportunity barely to sit in the back seat. And I'm one of 3 kids, and when I was growing up, I would sit on the hump in the middle. And that's very uncomfortable, right? And so we can all be going to the same place. We can all be working in the same environment and experience it very differently. And so I often say that 2 things can be true at the same time. There's some people who may experience the workplace great, right? They're in the front seat, they're getting all the promotions, they're getting the money that they're worth, they have all the connections, and so they don't know the experience of the person sitting on the hump. And so one might say, oh, women are treated great at this company, women are treated great at this organization, but the woman who's sitting on the hump all the time may never have had the opportunity to even talk with someone, communicate with someone that she had aspirations to get to the front, to get to the table, right? And sometimes the people in the front seat who are always at the table, always in the front, never take a look back to say, wow, I wonder how I can use my privilege in the front seat to help bring the person in the back. And so there's some people in the workplace that might even feel like they're not even in the car, right? And so again, 2 things can be true at the same time. People can experience the same workplace very differently. So I think it's very important that we think about how the workplace works for every woman, not just one. And oftentimes I'll hear people say, well, you know, some women have it just as hard as other women. And that is true. There are hierarchies of oppression, unfortunately. But the reality is, if we work together as women, think about no woman left behind, right? That every woman has the opportunity to drive the car, that every woman has the opportunity to choose the navigation of her career path. And so let's think about how we as women are helping each other as well. And for those men who consider themselves allies or managers, think about how you're listening and communicating and engaging with everybody in the car so that you get the most out of everyone. The last thing that I want to wrap up with is the active allyship, because I think in terms of getting our seat at the table, so we've talked about self-advocacy, number 1, how important that is. Number 2, success is not a solo sport. We have to build strategic relationships with each other. I know in my career, it happened to be 2 men who were my allies, success partners, my champions that spoke my name in the room that I wasn't in. And they helped me move forward. And therefore, I was able to help others along as well. So when you get your seat at the table, make sure that you don't just kick your hands behind your head and your feet up on the desk or on the couch, wherever you might be working from. Think about making sure you bring the next woman along with you, because there's more than enough room. The other thing that I will say about intersectionality is making sure that as women, we build relationships with each other. Because oftentimes, if you look at your pictures on social media or you look at your bookshelf of those who you read, we tend to sometimes gravitate to people who look like us, to people who think like us. And it's time that we start to expand our view. It's time that we expand empathy within ourselves, allow us to experience other people and hear them out, right? When we listen, when we educate, and when we activate what we've learned, then we can be better for each other. We can be better to each other. We can empathize with other people. And I think that's the last thing, is humanizing the experiences of everyone in the workplace. And even though many of you might have even been in a situation similar to what my manager said to me about the nail polish, when you see those things happening, we don't turn a blind eye to it. Right? We understand that is causing harm to somebody else. And how are we going to make sure that we create environments that cause no women harm? And so I hope that you will continue to activate your voice, build your network, and lean into your courage and push aside your caution, because nobody benefits at the table when we're cautious. And so those are my remarks, and I look forward to handing it over to Diana for the rest of our conversation.
Thank you so much, Minda. Oh my gosh, I actually found it very, very useful that you laid out, in 1, 2, 3. So you mentioned about building your squad, and we have several questions about this. And I think I have a little bit of advantage here reading some of the book, and also, knowing some of the podcasts. In your book, you say, when we build a great squad, in turn, people want to introduce us to their squads. This is what some in the business world call social capital. But also, it's very hard to build your squad if you don't have a seat in this group. So what would you advise to the young professional that are starting their career, and maybe even now in this challenging time, how they can make sure that, they are active at work, but also they have time to build the squad and build their social capital?
Yes, thank you for that question. I think it's tough, especially now we have so much on our plates. And so you're thinking, how am I going to do my work? How am I going to take care of the house, et cetera, and still build a network? And again, even in this environment where maybe we can't go to the happy hours or the birthday parties like we once did, there's still opportunities to build. And so the one thing that I would encourage you to do is when you're on a video conference and you're in a virtual meeting, even, is if you're able, show your face, right? Allow people to see you and remind them that, hey, yeah, I remember her from the office. Or, I think that, it's some of those small things that we may not think about. We might think, oh, I'm glad I don't have to show my face. But allow yourself to be seen, right? When it's possible. And then also too, the next step of that, and this is part of building your squad, is when it makes sense, chime in with your voice, right? Add to the conversation so that people get to know you. And part of building your squad is that relationship building, people kind of getting to know you in various ways, or use the chat, making sure that you're activating your voice, chiming in on matters that are important, and even use the chat to your strategy. If there's somebody in the meeting that you agree with, right? Or that you want to learn more about their perspective, maybe you're like, I want to learn more about why they think this way. This is a great opportunity to say, hey, I really liked what you said in the chat, or I wanted to learn more about what you said. Can we have a 15-minute virtual coffee, right? Let's get to know each other. Or if there's a manager right now, many of us are working from home, or senior leader saying, you know what, one of my goals is to be in a position similar to yours. I'd love to ask you some questions around that. This is an opportunity for us to build. And so even though the workplace might look a little bit different right now, there's still opportunities. We can still use our internet, our computers, our tablets, to be able to lean into those conversations. So don't think that for a minute you can't continue to build your squad. And the last thing I'll say, Diana, is building your squad also entails people who don't look like you, people who don't think like you, right? May not be the same age as you. So diversify, make sure your squad is intersectional, right? Make sure you're reading intersectional books, listening to podcasts, going to events. That's how you also build your squad, meeting new people. And so I would encourage you to definitely lean into that.
Thank you, Minda. We have several questions about the reference to the be aware of feelings that you mentioned earlier. Several of our participants, learners, would like you to elaborate a little bit about the feelings and about in the workplace.
I'm sorry, you cut out just a little bit, Diana. Did you say the feelings?
Yes, so you referred earlier at the quote, be aware of feelings. And several of our learners would like for you to elaborate a little bit in relation to the feelings in the workplace.
Okay, I think I'm not 100% sure, but I think what may be referring to is when I use the comment, beware of feeling like you're not good enough to deserve it. Is it that one? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think what I meant by that is understanding that your worth, right? Understanding your self-worth. And I think sometimes we're in environments where we're not always affirmed, right? We're not always told that you're doing a good job, or not. We may be missed. We may not get the promotion, right? Like we thought we were going to get, right? Or we might find out that someone on our team is making more money than we are and we're doing the same job. Some of those disappointments that we've experienced as women in the workplace, those are important and sometimes defining moments in our lives. But just because you experience that, don't think that you don't deserve better, right? And I think sometimes, even though our environments may try and tell us that, no, this is where you should be, you'll never aspire to anything more, we can't lean into those narratives, because those are not the narratives that we can believe in, right? We have to find those places. I also mentioned that find those tables, find those environments where you can plant yourself to grow, right? You can't grow in environments of people who don't see your worth. But first, it starts with you, your mindset. You have to believe that you deserve a seat at the table, right? You have to see yourself at the table, even if there's no one who looks like you, no one who thinks like you. And so I just want you to know, even if you've been in environments that have constantly said that you don't belong here or that you're not valued here, give yourself permission to find those places where you can be, where you can grow. Because I think sometimes when we're in those situations, Diana, we start to believe those lies, right? We start to believe that we're not better than this. And I'm going to tell you, I had to change my thought process, right? I had to look at myself in a new way and remind myself, you know what? I worked really hard for the things that I've accomplished. And even though this environment doesn't acknowledge that, I'm not going to stop that from my seat at the table. Maybe this isn't the place for me, but I still want my seat at the table because my dreams, my goals, my aspirations matter. So now I might have to strategize and lean on to my squad to find those opportunities, find those tables that matter, right? Because we've worked way too hard to believe that we don't deserve those seats, right? And so that's where beware of feeling like you're not good enough to deserve it. You do deserve it, right? But sometimes we have to remind ourselves of those things.
Thank you, Minda. It's interesting you mentioned the lean-in concept, and we all know that for years we spoke about lean-in in the context of when we do have a system of support, right? And now in the COVID challenging times, we see that we remain suddenly without any system. A lot of women currently are doing their work remotely while caring about sometimes kids, sometimes the elderly, and also, you know, doing the chores with the partners all together. So the room becoming an office during the day, the reading room during the evening, the bedroom. You know, a lot of us have a situation that we are sharing, you know, the same place with our friends. And in this environment, also we have young professionals who are joining, but also many of us that may be thinking to changing the professions, either to the loss of job because of the economy, because of certain times. We know that companies also are changing their strategies. So what does the workplace look like today? What are the challenges? And also from the intersectional point of view, that from the practical point of view, we need to understand. We have a question. I would like to understand intersectionality by way of live examples, to be more clear about this and to understand these examples when come to my situation. So if you can explain this a little bit, I think it will help us and our learners to understand better, because it's a vague concept and we all know the world, but I think not all of us grasp it into the understandable way.
Yeah, thank you for that. So intersectionality, I think at the core of it is understanding that each of us have different intersections. And so, for example, I am a woman. I identify as a woman. I identify as a Black woman. I identify as a daughter, as a partner, a pet mom. You know, there's an aunt. Like, each of us have different intersections that we identify with. And oftentimes in the workplace, we talk about gender initiatives, right? Gender, male, female in many contexts. And when we have initiatives like that, they tend to skew, when you're talking about women in the workplace, as I mentioned before, it tends to focus very heavily and benefit those in the dominant culture, right? So in my experience, in the workplace, when we had gender initiatives, the people who benefited from those initiatives for women tend to be white women, and Black and brown women didn't often benefit in the same ways, even though these initiatives were for all women, but they weren't really looking at the intersections of race and gender, or orientation and gender. And so it's part of those pieces of ourselves, right? And so that's the part in which we have to understand the importance of why it's important to not just say women in the workplace, but what women are we talking about? Are we being inclusive even in when we say women, right? So for example, let's say that you're going to an event and they say the event is for women in the workplace. And then you look at all the speakers, right? Are the speakers intersectional? Are they diverse, right? Do they have different perspectives? And that's part of the intersectionality that's so important, because that's how, when I talked about the car reference, understanding what it's like for all people in the car, right? Not just saying, oh yes, we're all going to the same place, but what is the experience of the person in the front seat versus the person in the back seat, or even both people in the front. One is driving and one is riding in the passenger seat. Both can be driving, both can be women in the car and experience that car ride very differently. And so that's the part I think that even Karina had mentioned at the beginning. Any person that experiences inequality affects everybody. And that's where I want you to see. So even now in the United States, for example, we have a lot of racial unrest right now, right? And some people would say, well, why is that a problem, right? And that's part of the intersectionality, understanding the experiences of other people, knowing that this affects everybody, not just Black people, right? It affects everybody. And I think that's the part of intersectionality, understanding that something isn't just one group's problem, but if somebody is negatively affected by it, then it's everybody's problem. And we have to be able to see each other and see those intersections. See me as a Black woman and my experience, right? And I see, someone who might not identify as me, but both of our experiences matter. And how do we navigate a workplace in which both of us have the opportunity to thrive?
It's interesting that we connected to the workplace. We spoke so much about individual action and how we can identify, how we can be better, what is the, some guidelines for us on how to get a seat at the table. But maybe for several minutes, let's go to the company, what they can do, what businesses around the world, especially those that started to understand that gender equality and diversity and inclusion and responsible business conduct is more than a right thing to do, right? So what they can do to make sure that they look at the internal policies, but also policies in their community and in the marketplace from the intersectional point of view, maybe even going further, what they can do to make sure that everyone can have an opportunity to have a seat at the table in their organization.
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked about that, because there's so much that, yes, as women, we can do to activate it, but we can do all the things, Diana, but if our companies aren't doing their part, then that's a problem, right? And so, in organizations, and I think that it's a partnership. I mentioned earlier that success is not a solo sport. And so intersectionality is so important, because this is where we really can move the needle. So if you look at right now the company that you might work at, or if you're a manager, think about what the other managers look like, right? So for example, recently I was looking on a website of a school district, and they have a very diverse student body, but I looked at all the teachers, and their teachers did not reflect the students in which they were teaching, right? And so it's not intersectional. And I think the part of that where companies, I think, sometimes get it wrong, which there's a lot of opportunities right now to get it right, is that we have to look at who's around the table currently, right? If we say that equality matters, if we say that gender equality matters, if we say that we want more diversity with women at the table, then we have to include all women, right? Currently in the United States, for example, we have the most women CEOs that we've ever had, which is around like 30 something, right? Still not a lot when you think about it. But none of the women are Black women or Latinx women. So when we say women and we make the say, hey, women are the most CEOs they've ever been, we're only talking about certain groups of women. And then when we break it down, there's only ever been in the history of Fortune 500 companies, one Black woman CEO ever to this date, Ursula Burns. And so when we talk about women in the workplace, we have to, again, provide opportunities to every woman. And so I would venture to say that it doesn't mean that there's no capable Black women to serve as CEO, right, of a company, or brown women. But the reality is, if you don't have intersectionality, if you don't have managers that are invested in diversity, if you don't have leaders that are talking about hiring diverse candidates, right, we're not going to, being intentional, right, we're not going to make the next hire until we have a diverse slate of candidates. And then from there, we're going to choose the right one, right? We're going to choose the best one. And so I think we really, a lot right now really is incumbent upon the managers and the leaders of these organizations, because their missions have to reflect the About Us page as well. And that takes intersectionality, people in the room who are in those rooms to say, hey, this is not okay. So you need somebody in there to say that. And the other part of it is understanding that there's room for growth, right? We're never going to benefit the future of work if we work in homogenized settings. It has to be diverse. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities for companies right now to get it right.
You know, we have a lot of comments with the idea, what I will even read. I'm really feeling inspired. Thank you, Minda. Thank you, Corina. We also have notes from our community saying that educating others, co-workers and other community members is also crucial. Raising awareness is also very important in struggle against unequal opportunities. They agree with the mention on the right place to grow. And we have some other questions also related to career development. And here I thought I will quote you. Speaking about career toolkit, you say, I firmly believe that we all need a career toolkit. Just as some women keep an extra hand sanitizer or lipstick in their purse, just in case, this toolkit is the way we act on our purpose statement, act on our blueprint. So you opened with some 1, 2, 3 on how to secure a seat and how we make sure we've got it. But we also know that a lot of us feel comfortable to have a seat at the table, but not necessarily at the leadership level. So speaking about career toolkit and about different level of representation, within career development, also in the company, organization, wherever we are at, what we should know and what our career toolkit should contain.
I love that question. So one thing that I'll say, if you're just starting out in your career or you're seasoned in your career, we all need to invest in ourselves at every level, right? Preparing for what's to come. And so maybe for me, one tool that I always have ready in my career toolkit at every level of my career, Diana, has been investing in public speaking. I used to be very afraid to speak out like this. Some days I'm like, I can't even believe I'm doing this because I remember where I came from, but I started to invest in myself. I started to take courses. I started to take seminars to say, you know what, this is an area that I know I'm going to need, right? If I want a seat at any table, you know, I'm going to need to use my voice, right? And influence others. And so I need to invest in this tool. And even now, I still invest in that tool because I want to continue to be more effective in how I storytell or how I answer questions. And so that's something that I'm constantly working on at every stage of my career. For someone else, it might be salary negotiation, right? Every level of your career, you're going to have to negotiate salary or benefits, etc. So for me, having a coach, hiring a coach, or taking courses on how I prepare for those conversations. And so I do believe there's always tools we need handy. And so start to think about the positions that you want to have, like maybe that you currently have and in your future. So for me, when I was just starting out, I used to look at the job descriptions of people in executive positions. And I'd say, what were the skill sets? What are the tools that I'm going to need in my toolkit? So that when I get to that point, have that opportunity, I'll be ready. And so I would encourage everybody to do the same thing. If there's somebody doing what you want to do, look at what skills, what tools they're using, and start to put those in your toolkit now.
And you actually foreseen the next question, because a lot of our people, participants asked about what are some seminars, what are some courses that are good to take in general for career development. But in closing of our discussion and the session today, if there is one thing, maybe two, that women around the world, career professionals, need to know about secure seat at the table and about intersectionality, what this should be?
Yeah, I think for intersectionality, again, realizing that if any woman is experiencing inequality in the workplace, how do we help them? How do we be an ally? How do we be a champion? Is we listen, educate, and activate. So once you're listening to what the experiences of some other women are, understanding them, getting to know what those pain points are, then you educate, right? Read the books, read books like mine, The Memo, and others that talk about other women's experiences. And then 3, activate, figure out what it is you'd like to do to show up for someone else, right? Because that's what we want. That's how we make the workplace better than we found it.
And I couldn't agree more. And I think it's also very important to make that squad, but also to discuss what you learn, because this is how you also understand different points of view, and you understand better the intersectionality from different perspectives. So great to discuss with you today, Minda. I'm sure we will receive more questions, and we will be happy to share all of these links. And now for some closing remarks, but also for post-discussion impressions, I will turn it over to Anna Feld, the program manager for We Empower program and head of Women Empowerment Secretariat.
Thank you so much, Diana, and thank you so much, Karina and Minda. This has been such an inspiring hour with so many ideas, and it made me also think about some of my own, what I've had in my own toolkit. And I just wanted to share one of them, because Minda, you were talking about making sure that you get a seat at the table. And my tactic has always been sitting in the front, because first of all, I feel like I'm more focused on what's happening. And second of all, it's less intimidating when you don't see all the hundreds of people that might sit behind you, and you might be more inclined to participate in the discussion. But I think a key word that you were talking about, Minda, was really about empathy. And I think that anyone that can empathize with other people, no matter their backgrounds, their intersectional, the intersectionality, I think empathy is really at the core. If you can empathize with somebody who's been left out of the table, if you can empathize with somebody who might not be at the table, and you'll invite them in, you will achieve so much. And we also talked a little bit about public speaking was also one of the areas that I was focusing on for my toolkit. And as you, Minda, I was also a very shy child, and pushed myself into a work in telemarketing. I was took a job as a tourist guide, everything to overcome this fear of not of public speaking, but also speaking with unknown people. And that really helped me in my toolkit. So I really recommend each and every one that have participated in today's webinar to really take a deep look inside and see what are the things that I'd like to work on. We, as UN Women, we are rolling out a Boost Yourself learning series that will be launched in December. And it really kind of will help, it has already helped us as we develop it, to really understand how we can take charge of our own future and really see what fits best for me in the career toolkit, as you were talking about, Minda. And we will talk about confidence. We already had one webinar on confidence, but also about assertiveness and how to fit into a team and all of the things that you have been talking about today, Minda. And also in terms of the companies that have joined us today, I just have one point to say that companies flourish when their teams mirror the consumers. And people know that. Talent know it because they choose companies that are inclusive and diverse. I know my own son, when he was looking for jobs, he said, I don't know if I would like to work for this company because there's no diversity. So the new generations are really looking for that diversity because it's more interesting and they know the company will grow better. And investors know it. So the more money will come to companies with more investors, with more diversity and inclusion. Finally, just what I really thought, Minda, was very important was the balance between courage and caution, and how we try to kind of put ourselves outside the box and not always be cautious. It's good to be cautious sometimes, but to really push ourselves to take a step outside the box and see that it's actually, it makes us feel empowered, it makes us feel good. So I would like to thank you so much, and I will take this opportunity to also thank Diana for leading a great conversation, and for Karina for kicking us off on a good note. And I think now we are ready to hear from you, all the participants, how you feel about the topic, specifically now on confidence. How do you feel more informed, somewhat informed, or well informed?
We are continuing to receive actually the feedback, and I should read because it's amazing. People say, great session indeed, very empowering. Minda, thank you, inspiring. Corina, you made me want to look more for the European Union legislation. Thank you for such an encouraging and inspiring speech. Listed tips are very useful, important for women in such a patriarchal society as Uzbekistan. We will make sure to do so via various links. And one more, we would like to understand if you are satisfied or if another session of this kind will be very helpful for our community.
Yeah, and what I liked also, Minda, was we need to show up for ourselves and we need to show up for each other. This is the words that are taken away from today's discussion.
Thank you.
We also have a feedback. This is a great session, and we at Interloop are working to make our workplace more diverse and inclusive. We would appreciate if there are more sessions arranged with specific reference to diversity. So companies already expressed their interest. We are happy. Thank you to leaders over there that recognize the importance of our agenda and would like to openly take a step further and mention the name of the company. We do think the reporting and the acknowledgement publicly of the steps that companies are taking are very important in order to share the examples. So let's see how we did. Very satisfied. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Corina. Thank you so much, Minda. Thank you so much, Anna. We had a very nice session today, very personal, because we did our best to openly and candidly respond to the questions. We appreciate the participation, and we would like to promise to our community that we would do our best to keep the learning session practical and continuing some good advices in order to build the workplace from the gender perspective and to build back better. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and have a good day.
Thank you.